Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. I'm your host, Rick the Barkeep, bringing you podcast number 96 here at the Tavern, presented by Hirotaku.com. Well, for Sentai fans out there, within the last week, we've actually gotten some updates regarding the upcoming 39th Sentai series. We're heading towards the tail end of Tokuger, and it's that time of year where rumors are going to start flying as far as what's next. And I always find this type of year very interesting, simply because the Sentai shows themselves are getting into the home stretch of final episodes, where they're getting really interesting and the stories developing and things are coming to a head. But the one thing that everybody seems to be focusing on is what's going to happen next year. So it's always a curious little exercise year in, year out. And a number of people have asked me to kind of give my thoughts on the 39 Sentai information that we have now. Now, I've been hesitant to actually talk about it, but enough of you all have requested, so I thought, this week we'll go ahead and talk about something not as controversial as we typically have here at the Tavern. And there is a little bit of information to go off of, and I want to kind of give you guys the thoughts that I have on what little we have, and something a little bit more broader in terms of Super Sentai and what the 39th Sentai is telling me, at least, regarding the trends and the future direction of Sentai within at least maybe the next year. So first of all, through a copyright website, we did go ahead and get the newest name of the Sentai, and I do believe this is going to be pretty much 100% official. And if I can read my katakana right, then this new series is called Shuriken Sentai Ninninger. Pretty interesting title, and I'll get into that here in a minute. And actually what you guys are seeing on your screen is supposedly the concept design for the Ninjas. I think that's how you would go ahead and say it. For the Rangers. Let's just go ahead and make it simple like that. So again, very little to kind of go off on here, and really, when we look at this image right here, first of all, I'm not really confident that's going to be the final design. 99% of the time when we get these leaked images, they're usually never final, or in some cases not even really close to what the final design looks like. I mean, look at Kyoryuger, for example. The whole rumor was that they were based on prehistoric animals, and when we found out they were dinosaurs, the designs are significantly different than what we got for the actual Kyoryuger designs. So while this is an interesting image, I'm not going to look at this and say, yeah, that's what they're going to go ahead and look like. I'm going to wait till we get an official image within the next couple of months, probably late December, early January. But the one thing that everybody is kind of latching onto here, first of all, is the fact that because of their name, Ninja, they're going to be another ninja-based team. And this would actually be the third chronologically for the Super Sentai series. First being Kaku Ranger, then Hurricaneger, and now Ninninger. And there are a number of things I have to go ahead and say kind of about the concept and everything. First of all, I do want to address this as well. As soon as everybody found out the name of this, and I'm talking like the day of, the comments that everybody was making on Facebook and on Twitter and everything is that Saban is almost assuredly going to skip over Tokuger in favor of Ninninger. And their evidence for this was basically the same evidence that we kind of brought up in why Tokuger would not be adapted. And that is that children in America do not have trains as their main interest in anymore. That's not part of everyday life as it is in Japan, but apparently dinosaurs are. And by this line of logic, people are saying, well, it's ninjas, so of course we're going to do this because it's much better than trains. Meaning that ninjas are a part of everyday American life? I mean, I'm not quite sure where the logic is there, but people seem to think that because they are ninjas, we are automatically going to skip over Tokuger to go into the next Power Rangers Ninja something, Ninja Force, whatever it's going to go ahead and be. which I think is going to be disappointing. And I've already kind of made my thoughts clear on about skipping Sentai and Tokuger and things of that particular nature. But I'm starting to see this as a pattern in Sentai as far as why we have ninjas coming up next for the 39th Sentai before we get to the 40th anniversary. And that I want to go into some detail about. Now, this actually came to me when I was thinking of things related to Power Rangers, and I'll kind of connect the dots here for you. I was actually looking into research for an upcoming paper I have due about Power Rangers, particularly looking at the different eras in Power Rangers history, and I thought to myself, what kind of eras are there in Sentai? Which really there don't seem to be any distinct eras that we can divide up Sentai into. Most of the divisions that are done in Power Rangers are generally accepted because of monumental events that happen within the show and its production. I mean, obviously, we have the Zordon era, which is the first 6 years where Zordon was alive, and there was a continuous plot throughout the series. Post-Zordon, where we got the rotating out every year, different storylines. And, of course, the Disney era, where Disney took over production, and now the Neo-Saban era, where Saban has reacquired the franchise. So there are even divisions within the Power Rangers timeline, production-wise, to kind of help define each era for hopefully what it will be eventual academic research into the series. Now, Sentai doesn't really have that, so I kind of got to thinking to myself, what kind of divisions would you have within Sentai? And I've melded around with it and looked at some things, and maybe here in the future I'll come up with you guys my accepted divisions and eras within Super Sentai. But that all being said, I am thinking about everything since the 35th anniversary, since Gokaiger or Gokaiger came out, and where we are within the Sentai franchise. And if I had to describe this era of Sentai, everything since Go Buster on up, I'm going to go ahead and say this is an apologist era for Sentai. And let me kind of explain what I mean here. If you look at, let's start with Gokaiger first. Insanely popular. We've talked about that a number of times on this series, and frankly, Gokaiger and Super Mega Force are a topic that crop up far too often on this show, I think. But nevertheless, the reason it's talked about so much here and everywhere else is because it was very popular. People in Japan loved it. People in America loved it. It was just a great series. Then when we get to the next season, we get to Go Buster. And as I've stated before, Go Buster was radically different from any Sentai that came before it. The suits, the weapons, the storyline, the mood, the atmosphere, the music. Things about this show were just completely different than what you had from a typical Sentai series. And the truth of the matter is, it didn't do very well. The ratings were quite low, much lower than the previous season. And somewhere in the middle of that show, they ended up changing the formula to where it became more of a traditional Sentai. And I'll explain what I mean by that. The first half of Go Buster was pretty much dominated by fighting Messiah, fighting this threat, not letting him get into our world. Whereas the second half became a hunt for the Messiah cards and fighting Enter and Escape on a regular basis. And the show lost a lot of its cohesion because the direction seemed to change. The stories were not as dark, they were not as emotionally driven in the latter half as it was to the first half of the season. And that's debatable amongst fans, but that's something I really noticed when I actually sat to watch every episode kind of back to back to back. That there was this kind of clear division. And what I account that for is that the series was doing very poorly. I mean, I had heard so many bad things about Go Buster once it started, and really things continued into the end of the show. So it wasn't really received well by, obviously, American audiences, and then the viewing of the show in Japan also decreased as well. So then we go into the next season, Kyoryuger, and the thing about Kyoryuger that's very noticeable is it does seem to return to a lot of concepts and ideals that you have from earlier Sentai, and not just from a production standpoint, but also from a marketing standpoint. Most obvious being the batteries. In Gokaiger, of course, you had the keys and the gotta collect them all phase that had. But when you got to Go Buster, there was no collecting to be done. You had a finite number of Zords, as you would have in older seasons. You didn't have a collector battery, soul chip, ball, train, whatever. You didn't have any of that stuff to go ahead and collect. And as I was told, the toy sales were down as well. So when Kyoryuger comes out, the first thing they do is they develop the battery system, and they come up with 500 different batteries for you to collect through magazines, mail-ins, who knows where you could have gotten these things. But they were basically all over the place. The Kyoryugers had a lighter, more lighthearted tone and feel to them than the dark and brooding Go Buster series. You had you had 10 different characters as opposed to the limited 5 characters with the supporting cast. You had multicolored heroes. You had the Zords, which were dinosaurs, which harkened back to the previous 2 dinosaur series, and you even had aesthetic changes in the show, particularly things like the dancing and the samba and all that stuff that made things brighter and happier, and even the fact that you have the katakana for the name of the robos and mechas on the screen, which is something they hadn't done in maybe 20 years at that point in the series' history. So Kyoryuger, in my mind, was an apology for Go Buster by changing things kind of back to the way people expected them, with the collecting mentality, lighten up the tone, multiple rangers, all this stuff. Because even with the multiple rangers, you have this kind of idea of multiple combinations of teams, something that's akin to what we had in Gokaiger. And then we get to ToQger, which I think is even more of an apology for Go Buster and a chance to boost ratings, because Kyoryuger, their ratings were actually worse than Go Buster, even though Kyoryuger has better reviews and had better toy sales. But in the case of ToQger, what they do, they had tons, more and more trains. You know, you can make a train a mile long now with all the toys they had. Those became the collectible items. They tried to recapture what was good about Gokaiger in the sense that they had the line changes where you can have the male become the pink ranger and the yellow ranger can be the red ranger and all this stuff. It's basically a 2.0 version of the Gokai Change or Gokai Light, whatever you want to go ahead and do with it. But even with that, the series isn't being well received for whatever reason, and the toy sales are also down, despite all the toy collecting I did this summer in Japan. And then now we get to Ninninger. And what I'm thinking in the logic of Ninninger is a couple of things. I still think they're trying to apologize for Go Buster, because it seems to me that Gokaiger was such a success that anything that came after it, whether they took a risk and tried something new or not, was kind of destined to fail, particularly if they were going to be completely different. And they want to get back to the original formula, I guess. So what worked for Kyoryuger is they brought back the dinosaur theme. What worked for ToQger and Kyoryuger is the collectible item theme. Even though, again, one show it failed in toy sales, others succeeded. But that's kind of the basic thinking that they have. So when I look at Ninninger, one thing they're doing is they're taking something that's another motif that's being repeated, and they're trying to go ahead and gauge the success of, I think, the Japanese cultural understanding. Because I think they also plan this out for American audiences, and I think where this is going to go with Power Rangers. And I know that may seem crazy, but kind of hear me out on this point. Ninjas are incredibly popular in America. Look no further than the Ninja Turtles, basically. And ninjas, as opposed to, say, samurai, are a little bit more easy to adapt into an American context. Again, look at Ninja Turtles. Look at all these, pop culture ninjas, like in G.I. Joe with Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow and all those guys. It's something that's easily adapted into an American context. Also, ninjas much like samurai, are culturally relevant within Japan. Maybe not in everyday culture, but it's something that the Japanese audience can tap into as far as their shared identity and their shared past. So I think the reason that we have ninjas as part of my apologist theme, basically, is that the ninjas are going to harken back to more popular series, because Kaku Ranger in itself was very popular, because it helped the franchise. Hurricaneer was wildly popular by my understanding. That's why we got 10 years after movie sequel. So they're going to try and recapture those those ninja feelings and the way that Sentai fans feel about ninjas overall. So I think this was a calculated effort with the ninja theme to capitalize on what is popular and try to look to it to be popular for an American audience, and again tap into that cultural reservoir that is the Japanese culture. Further, I suspect what they're going to go ahead and do is they're going to be all up on this collecting thing. Whatever we saw in Tokuger and Kyoryuger in the last couple of years, they're going to ramp it up to a higher extreme. And what do I mean by that? Well, I'm not quite sure. Because, again, Tokuger toy sales are down, but remember, what's the main difference between Gokaiger and the Tokuger? Tokuger, you buy really one toy at a time. That's kind of how they're packaged for $11. But for about the same price, you got 5 Ranger keys, more or less, back when they were out there. So whatever they come up with as a gimmick, and that's simply what it is, it's a gimmick, it's going to be collect this, collect it all now. And I imagine it's going to tie into the show in some way, such as whatever's collecting gimmick is, it's going to be important. And they're going to spread around amongst a number of different toys out there. So I think what's going to eventually happen is that Ninninger will be the last attempt before the 40th anniversary to kind of gain its audience back. Because honestly speaking, since Gokaiger, these are kind of dark times for Sentai. The last 3 seasons have not been well received, either critically or by the ratings, and toy sales have been kind of up and down, up and down. And the way that the Power Rangers are performing in America since this time is also very erratic and frankly down here in the Neo Saban era. So it wouldn't surprise me if Bandai and Toei and the forces that be are really trying to revitalize the franchise by giving us something that's really familiar before we get to the 40th anniversary. Speculation on what the 40th anniversary is could be anything, but I think it's going to be greatly dependent on what's going to go ahead and happen here. And as much as I hate to say, I think the toy sales are going to be a big deal in that. And I suppose they think they can move ninja items. And I would not be surprised if it's animals. That's also something that seems to do well as a lot of different animal toys. So maybe they'll be tying to animals like the past 2 Ninja Sentai shows, because Kaku Ranger had animals, Hurricaneer had animals. So that seems to be the direction that we're going. So I know I haven't really talked anything about Ninninger, but again, there isn't anything to talk about given the limited information that we have. But it is still my opinion that what is happening is that Toei is in a period where they're trying to regain their audience by giving them what they think that they want and trying to recapture this nostalgia for previous Sentai. And, to be honest, I don't think Sentai was in the best of shape when it got to Gokaiger, but it had a renewed interest in the franchise because of how it connected to the nostalgia of the series. I mean, it was well received by both American and Japanese audiences, so they're probably trying to tap into the same sort of nostalgia and capitalize on the best they can. And the thing is, I hope Ninninger works. I hope it becomes one of the most popular Sentais out there because, frankly, we need to revitalize the franchise. When we look at the history of Sentai, we know for a fact that Car Ranger saved Sentai from being canceled. I'm going to bet money that Gokaiger saved Sentai. And again, with the way the trends are going, Ninninger needs to save Sentai to keep it going, to get to that 40th anniversary, to get to the 50th anniversary. That's something that needs to go ahead and happen. Will it be successful? Well, time's going to go ahead and tell. And when we have more information, we'll definitely cover it here at the tavern. But I really hope that this takes off. I want to like this season more than I have, say. I mean, I loved Go Buster and I love Kyoryuger. Not that big a fan of Tokyuger, but I have only seen the first 12 episodes. I know I need to get up on that because they're almost up to 40 episodes now. Nevertheless, I want to be a fan of this. I want this to be popular because I do want Sentai to go ahead and continue, not only for it to be adapted in the Power Rangers, but obviously I just want it to continue in Japan because it's such a cultural touchstone in a way for younger generations and going into the older generations. So a lot is going to be riding on Ninninger, and that's simply all I can go ahead and say about it, is that it needs to do well. It needs to be successful. Otherwise, next couple of years we may not have Sentai. 40th may be the last, and we'll look back at 40 years of Sentai and that's it. And that's a discouraging thought, but here's hoping that Ninninger will change the trend, have renewed interest, and the series will get better from this point. That's what I'm hoping anyway. So those are my thoughts on Ninninger, and I guess, again, the most recent Sentai and the trends that we are seeing. But I definitely want to know what you guys think out there. Do you guys think that Sentai has been in decline? Do you think Ninninger can save it? What do you think of the ninja concept? Do you think it's something that's going to go ahead and work and resonate with audiences? Leave your comments below. I'd definitely love to hear what people think. And, of course, do you guys really think that they're going to stick up over to Tokyuger for ninjas? I would like to know what my audience feels about that. So, I want to thank you guys for listening. Have yourself a good night, and the tavern is now closed.